This is the first interview for FinOps after the low-hanging fruit, and I am extremely happy to start with Olivier, but it's fine. I'll say it the French way. Oliver, today, and let's start by introducing yourself a little, please.
Thank you so much, Frank. Absolute pleasure to be here. Yes, my name is Oliver. I have just recently, literally like yesterday, received my results, graduated from the University of Manchester. I studied thank you. I studied a degree called Information Technology Management for Business. So, probably later we're going to speak about FinOps, and you can see kind of why I eventually fell into it. But yeah, I did that at the Alliance Manchester Business School. A little fun fact about me, this was never my calling. I was supposed to be an actor up until I was 18 years old. And then I think when I hit that age, I realized that the world is a lot bigger than just the world of acting. I started to fall in love with public speaking around that time. I had some opportunities and I realized that I could get the same fun, the same connection with people, the same ability to tell stories in different settings, just, not really just telling stories on a stage in the theater, but also in a boardroom or, in a lecture theater. And I kind of took that into the world of technology and business, and I've learned an incredible amount of things. And as we'll talk about later, I was even very lucky to be able to research FinOps as part of my undergraduate dissertation, which I'm very proud of.
But that's exactly how we met. So tell us a little more about that research, but from a high level, what you can say, and in particular, how many people did you speak to, and what are the gifts you think your research is going to give to those practitioners, and what did you get back?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of the amount of people I interviewed 21 practitioners from around the world. So that was people in Europe, people in America, and also people in Asia. And I think getting that global perspective was really, really crucial for this. I approached it. I can take you all the way back to the start of when I, had the first inkling. So I did a year-long internship at UBS. It was a technology industrial placement. So any of those familiar with the UK sort of education system, you'll know that usually in the third year of a university degree, you're able to do a year-long internship. It's paid. You get to work for actual companies. And, I was lucky enough to join UBS, and they had this team called the Cloud FinOps team, and I had no idea what that was. And we had this like little session where there was all the different hiring managers. They were all pitching their roles basically. And then the woman that was pitching this FinOps role, I was like, that sounds cool. I like the sound of that, helping people across the firm, just manage technology better. And kind of signed on, and then it just became this year-long incredible learning journey of not only learning about FinOps, but for me it was weird. I learned cloud through FinOps. I think most people start with cloud and then learn FinOps. I did the other way around, which was absolutely fascinating. I did my FinOps certified practitioner certification as well, and AZ-900. So I learned a bit more about Azure. And then when I left, I was starting to think, okay, I'm back in my final year of university. I need something to research for my dissertation. And it has to be something technology, management, business related. What's a really good thing that I just recently did? FinOps, that would be really cool. So as I was approaching it, I knew for me, I never was like the technical guy. Never really. I care a lot, very similar to you, Frank. I care a lot more about those almost like the squishy bits of technology. Right?
The squishy bits, I'm going to read it.
The human element, right? Behavior and culture. Those are the things that I've always been attached to I think mostly because of my background in the theater. Yep. So I knew I wanted to look into that for FinOps. And then I started digging into what available academic research there was, and there was barely anything. That's when I knew, okay, I really need to make sure that this project that I work on is done the right way. So then I went, okay, I need to research people, and it'll be from around the world. I don't care if they're FinOps leads, if they're just FinOps engineers, if they're in the central team or if they're outside of the central team. I wanted to get as many perspectives as possible. And throughout that sort of early stage, essentially what I wanted to figure out was, what is the current mental state of FinOps? It's the title of the dissertation. Nice. I wanted to essentially figure out how practitioners today and in the past, how they have navigated decision making. What were those things that influenced the way that they did things? Was it really just organizational culture, or did it have something to do with their background as well? So trying to paint that behavioral, contextual, cultural element to FinOps, I think most of us are, not very privy to, because the field is still very new as well. So yeah, very, very proud. That's a very long spiel on the research.
That's amazing.
Hopefully
That's
that makes
exactly why
sense.
you're here. I'm not supposed to be the one doing the speaking, especially that it seemed that my camera is struggling or my computer is struggling. So perfect.
no.
You continue. Don't worry. That's fine. We'll find a way. People are here to listen to new things. They see my face very often already. So, but yeah, so that's really good. So, and the next part of my question was about what do you think your research will give to another community, but in this case, the practitioners, and also what you got, I understand being, well, first the knowledge, but in my head, I can only imagine you've received 21 views, and as FinOps is so new, everyone will have their opinions. I know I shared mine, and I'm pretty sure it was strange compared to others, and others will have others, and we all have our own opinions, and we can be quite strongly attached to them. Let's put it that way. And so, again, what your research will bring to us, and me in particular, the people that have participated in it, but also all the other practitioners, and what did you get really out of it personally?
Yeah, great question again. I think for practitioners, it was really interesting because I saw this during the interviews, during the conversations. I think it's almost like holding a mirror back up to themselves, and they're able to kind of look at themselves in a perspective that they probably weren't able to look at. One of the things that I essentially had figured out because of the research is that one element that can definitely affect a practitioner's way of thinking and the way they do things is whether the performance systems in their organizations, if they're directly tied to the performance that we need to see for FinOps. If that doesn't exist, they're probably not going to look at themselves and go, okay, what's my, how has my background affected the person that I am today? How am I changing the culture here? They're trying to figure out what success looks like for that organization. Yeah. So I think throughout the conversations, I could slowly see it in the faces of the people I was interviewing. They're like, oh, interesting. I didn't really think of that. And, one of the things, and one day I really want to get this paper out there so that, people can read this. But one of the things I was realizing was that people really are affected by their background. So the places they came from, if they came from a technical background, financial background, leadership, I think all of those things changes what FinOps is. And right now, in my personal opinion, I am not a FinOps leader. I've only technically done the work for about a year. So do not take my word as gospel. But the way that I see it, FinOps has a really nice, strong foundational definition.
Yep.
But after that, wherever it's placed in different organizations, it's wildly different. And I think that, that organizational definition and how FinOps is implemented elsewhere is heavily dependent on the practitioners. It's heavily dependent on that central team that's within that organization and how leadership view it as well. So for the practitioners, I kind of wish that this is a mirror back to them to make them realize, wow, there's so much more to me as a practitioner than I once thought. I'm not just a number. I'm a story. I'm a journey into this amazing field. And I think, for the practitioners that didn't participate in the study, I think it's a good, global, almost like blueprint into how FinOps works at the moment, right, across a variety of industries, because there were people from financial services, people from, software development, people from consulting, and everyone's doing it slightly differently. So it's really good when you watch FinOps X and you see all these speakers talking about their different contexts and their different experiences. I kind of wish that this paper was the same thing. You kind of read it and you see, also, this person has had this experience. I can relate to that. Or they've had this experience. I've never seen that. I need to give that a try. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to give back to other practitioners in the community. And the last group I want to bring up before I touch on myself is, I think, organizations. I call out at the end of the paper, I say that organizations need to kind of redefine FinOps within They need to change how they view it. They need to change how they incentivize it, because I'm a staunch believer, and I also feel the same in the research, that FinOps ultimately is a behavior. It's something that, it's a culture. It's something that everybody must do. And I think if you just simply throw in a central team and say, be this policing financial function for the organization, it's not going to go anywhere, because people are going to get afraid of it. It's like having your dad, constantly scolding you. You'll want to rebel and, hide things from your dad when he catches you. So that's the way that I kind of that's the way I have, because I've seen in my time at UBS FinOps being done that way, and then FinOps being done the more grassroots approach.
Okay.
So getting people on board. So I'm kind of hoping that this paper kind of reveals to organizations that FinOps is something that's happening within our brains, and it's happening, in these relationships that we make with people within, within our teams and across organizations as well. And I think for myself, this is a really long answer, I apologize. For myself, I am brand new to FinOps, Frank. I literally only heard about the term in May 2024. Never came across it. And I think FinOps can be different for so many different people in so many different contexts. And knowing all of that, and experiencing all of that, I think that's the best way to learn. Knowing what's available and listening to incredible people like yourself, speak on all these things that you probably wouldn't have known in the first place. So for me, it was kind of learning 21 different implementations of FinOps and 21 different journeys of FinOps. And I even interviewed someone that's had a very similar pathway to me, which was really fascinating because I sort of related to that person throughout it. So I got a lot out of it, and I feel a lot more confident, now realizing I can actually contribute back to the FinOps community, because it's given me so much. It's given me this incredible career path, and all these skills and the ability to understand cloud from a different perspective. Now soon to be AI, I hope. And now I'm able to give back. So that's one of the things I've gotten out of it, and I'm really appreciative.
Oh, that's amazing. And so my big summary, slightly ironic, is we're all making it up as we move. We're all trying to make it work. We depend completely on the company, etc. And it's one of the things I am in my head fighting to understand the best approach, because we do get a framework from the foundation that everyone uses, but it's a framework, and exactly as in a house is just piece of wood. And so then you need to start building your walls. You need to start building the configuration inside that framework. And I think that's the bit which I would love more standardization. I would love more almost prescriptiveness, if you want. I don't even know if that's a word, but anyway, I want it to be more prescriptive. I want to say, hey, normally these are the 3 standard reports everyone should have, every tool should have. The equivalent in finance, as you are aware, would be, hey, this is a balance sheet, a P&L, a cash flow statement. Everyone does those 3 things. Just, it's obvious. Then you can play on top, start adding your ratio, your belief, your thinking, create on top. But I'm missing that bit. I really think that FinOps should have, more prescriptive. And I would like also to highlight how I think you've met what I would call the first generation of FinOps practitioners, when none of us came to FinOps in a straight line. We all came from whatever was our background, and it's either that finance person that loves coding or loves tech, or it is that coder that has an MBA for any kind of reason. And these people have that mix of interest, and usually, unfortunately, procurement is out of the way and leadership is out of the way. You don't come from leadership into FinOps most of the time, which is quite interesting. And so, but this is changing. I can see how there are many more now practitioners which are just starting, and they're starting as FinOps. And it is mind-blowing to me, because there are some concepts that they know only from the theory, from the book. Well, we've been speaking in lots of other communities about all the little things you do which are different, or the complex bits, or you can hear in conversation people telling you, oh, we need unit economics. And in my head, it is hard. I mean, it is really, really, really hard. Okay. And we're going to forecast. And then they tell you they're accurate to the percent. And you say, that is never going to happen. There is no chance. Or you're using SAP and you're flat and you don't really need a forecast in the first place. Or you've updated it daily. And sometimes they tell you, oh yeah, we update it daily. I say, that's not a good thing. It is very interesting that there is a big change, and I think your research will show this first generation. And what I'm telling you is you will need to do it again soon, that same research in some formal way with people who started FinOps in the last year. Ask the foundation to give you access to those people that really are starting with the first title or second title is FinOps something.
Yeah,
because
I wish I would have interviewed myself because I'm the perfect candidate for that. Yeah, no, you're 100% right, because I'd noticed that there were different responses based on how new into the world they were. There were a couple people that viewed FinOps very differently. And when I found out about their journey into FinOps, it made a lot of sense. And I think that comes through in the paper a bit more. In the sort of thematic analysis world, we call it deviant codes, right? So deviant examples. And it's very easy, I think, in any sort of data analysis job. Oh, deviancy, we need to make the numbers look really good. We need to make, the majority. No, but for me, I wanted to focus on a lot of those, on a lot of those examples, because they're really fascinating. It's like, okay, why have they come about that way? And it is mostly because they have only, as you said, learned about FinOps through whatever the FinOps Foundation is outputting, rather than through experiencing it and, figuring it out as you go along, which is what most of the first generation have done. And I have also seen the first generation have a really strong professional identity. They really care about it, and they are, actively talking, they're actively promoting, they're actively sharing. The new generation, at least from what I have seen so far, they're a bit more quiet. Slowly growing into it, because as you said, right, because of that lack of prescriptive natures, there's no full definition of what good FinOps is, how FinOps should be. I think most people don't know whether they should talk about it, because they don't know if it makes any sense. They might think, oh, I go to the first generation and they're going to say, that's a load of rubbish. Don't care. So that's another thing, actually, I'd like the paper to do, is to help the first generation realize they need to shush and listen to this new generation, because they've got some new ideas. And then also the new generation, make them realize that they can add, their stories and their experiences matter. Because that's how FinOps, in my view, I wasn't there from the beginning, but from the beginning up until now, it was just this community slowly, adding on top of this like hill, more and more information, more and more knowledge, more and more wisdom. I think this new generation needs to add to that as well. And especially now, it's a very exciting time for FinOps. So I think more and more, hopefully, not just me, but the other people after me as well. I'm hoping that this report, if it does get published, I'm looking into publishing it into peer-reviewed journals. If it does happen, that will then spark a bit more of a chain of maybe more and more students looking into FinOps, not even from the foundation, but looking into it as a research area. Because it's really fascinating stuff.
I think you've uncovered there something which is really interesting. At least I am fascinated by FinOps because it is that messy middle. And I love the chaos that comes from being the messy middle, trying to structure something without any political power, usually, or an extremely limited one. Yet at the same time, you need to work with 4, 5, 10 people, which have no reason to listen to you, really. And so that it is quite interesting, because we all came up with different ways and approaches to it. I came up with context is everything and top-down FinOps. I want FinOps to help strategy of the company being implemented. I'm old school in some formal way. I see the word value to be related to to try to make it as simple as possible just for the beginning. And the simple as possible is with value for shareholders, because that's where most companies start. So if you want to have a definition of value that is being analyzed, criticized, validated, checked, etc., for centuries probably, that is going to be value for shareholders. How does that trickle down to us? How does the decisions made by the board and the C-suite should be implemented and trickling down to tech? Because forever, for the 60, 70 years we had IT, we've never really managed to be good at program and value and recognizing the value. And I think FinOps, that's why also I love it, is the closest we have to get to an answer to that, which I found extremely fascinating for me. So yeah, so by the way, listeners, the first video I did for this podcast is an explanation of who has the power in a company, how you have shareholders, you have the board, and you have auditors. The C-suite is not in the picture to start. They don't have the direct power. You have the three and how they work together. Next one, hopefully coming soon, is going to be a detail on shareholders, going into the shareholders' details, because they are fascinating, but they're individuals quite often. But going back to us, the next thing I want to talk about, I am fascinated by mental models, which are simplification of the mind, simplification of the thinking, so you can get to usually good decisions faster. And so you have the classic, I would say the mental model is, for cloud in particular, is if a listed company is doing something, there is a financial reason behind. For example, that's one of my mental models. So when I see a cloud vendors doing something new or changing or evolving, I don't take it as granted, whatever they're telling me, which usually is technical. I try to find the financial aspect of it. The other one is flip the coin, as I say. If someone gives me a position, I will try to see the other side. It doesn't mean it's devil advocate. Devil advocate is usually negative. In this case, it is simply to say, what if we invert that? What if instead of seeing the 80% that do A, we were looking at the 20% that are not doing A? And why are they not doing A? Because 80% are. All these kind of things fascinate me. But I haven't seen many created in FinOps. And I was hoping possibly that you and I might discuss and see if we can come up with some in FinOps that might help the old and new generation, as I call them now.
Yeah. Whilst not quite a model, it's more of a, it's the right word I'm thinking of. I think it's a euphemism. I have discovered, especially throughout this research, that FinOps really is like Google Translate. FinOps practitioners are
Yes.
Google Translate. They are essentially just translators. That's all. They are, and this is really fascinating because it brings me back to what I learned on my degree. So my degree is IT management for business. So we aren't fully software engineers. We're not fully business managers. We know enough of both worlds to connect the bridge between them. So we learned a lot on presenting. We learned a lot on business analysis. We've learned a lot on project management, because a lot of those skills, this is really particular for university, aren't taught. They're kind of things that you kind of have to pick up on. So you get a lot of theory. Application, that's kind of up to you. Our degree really focused on the application. Theory came second. It was just very much like the early days of FinOps. Just learn as you do it. You will figure it out as you go. So that, when I started doing FinOps at UBS, I started realizing, hold on a minute, it's not as complex as the foundation likes to say it is. It's really simple. It's a translation practice. That's it.
I love that. I think what you just said is incredible. So first, you've made me discover what degree I should have done.
It's a good one.
Which is okay. But we're going to drop regrets. Regrets are useless. Let's move on. The other thing is, yes, I think I call that was a bridge And we said it, I remember saying it in a keynote with Stephen Old. We were discussing about FinOps as a foreign language, because lots of people, and we say, look, you're talking with finance. They've been there for 5,000 years. They probably have a name for it. They've probably thought about it. Whatever you're presenting to them, that is finance related, money related, they know. Now it's your job to find the right word. It's not their job to learn yours. It's your job to find theirs. And it might be that we are not educating enough the people to learn, exactly as you were saying, a little of finance, a little of procurement, a little of technical, because we all come from a background, and most of us will come from technical. We come from technical background because that's how cloud's born. Cloud is born from technical, using their credit cards, like it's called shadow IT. And it became so big that now you cannot get rid of it. And it's extremely useful. It's brilliant for lots of things. But from finance perspective, it's horrible. Procurement, terrible. And so it is, you as the FinOps person, I love this, is you are that bridge, you are that translator. And so I think what is important in your image for me is how a translator understands both languages. And is not trying neither to create a third one in the middle, nor is trying to force anyone to learn the language of the other. And that, I think, is an interesting mental model to say, you are a translator. If you don't understand it, ask to the person explaining, because you need to understand. And then explain. So we have two mental models. You are a teacher almost. You will have to be a learner and a teacher, both at the same time.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of a misconception that once you implement a hub and spoke model, everything's fine, because, oh, great, central team does most of the initial heavy lifting, and then, you know, the spokes, or the champions, they will do everything from that point onwards. Because you don't fully understand whether each of those spokes are doing the same level of translating as you are as the hub, messages can get mixed. Definitely. And again, this is what my research has uncovered. This is what I think, people have spoken about in FinOps for years. FinOps is different for a lot of different people. And, people like you asking for a standard, it shouldn't be like this. Let's just all agree on one foundation. And then I think some people embrace that, and they love the fact that FinOps is so different from others, because they can claim that we are FinOps, but then they're not really FinOps. So
they're FinOps their way.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really, and this is what I've loved as a student, because I was still a student when I came into FinOps. This was in the third year of my 4-year university degree. It was fascinating because, again, it is another like an example of being the bridge between two different, very, very different places, right? In the business world and the tech world. And then coming into FinOps, it's almost like within those tech worlds and business worlds, there's even more divide and, more bridges that need to be built. So it's been really interesting learning about it. And I think a lot of the time I see the whole, the hub and spoke model works, because we've got all these champions. I think by understanding FinOps is a translation practice, you can start to prescribe a bit more what things to translate and how to translate them, depending on what stakeholders you're talking to, because you're probably aware of this, and most of the listeners are probably aware of this as well. The way you speak to finance is very different from the way you speak to procurement, or very different from the way you speak to IT. It's
absolutely
very, very different. And if you have that ability to what I like to call code switch, when you start to speak their language, when you put on the accent, you make them feel comfortable, that's the thing that you need. But if not everyone in the sort of FinOps world, in this organization, is doing it the same way, messages are missed.
Yes, it's almost you do the way you were describing the hub spoke model. It reminded me of community builder. To say you need to create a community almost. And the equivalent of user groups are these ambassadors, these spoke, the spoke. Yeah. And the hub is here not even to do work, is here to make sure the message is consistent, the things, how we do things is consistent, whatever is the run book, the language, the spoken, and also more importantly, bringing all the best practices, all the learning back into the center and then exploding them again so that everyone get access to them. But I think that's great. So going back, is there something, if you were to find one mental model, what would it be on top of the one we found, which is you need to be a learner and a sharer, you need to be you need to be a translator. Which one would you?
Yeah, good question. I have always wanted to see FinOps as a behavior, not as a framework, not as an organizational culture or a rule set. It's a behavior. It's like a mindset.
Yep.
You kind of switch it on or you switch it off. You intensify it, you don't. Anytime I was working at UBS and I was in that central FinOps team talking to a few stakeholders, I think for me, of course, I was doing that translating, but the thing that made it really easy in terms of speaking to these people and trying to make them understand these concepts that I know so well is if I really just bring it back down to I want to show you this cool thing that you can do. Like I want you to be excited about it and I want you to find a bit of fun with it. I think that I found a bit more success than just simply telling them, okay, you want to accomplish this, do this. If I approach it more like, here's this really fun thing that you can do. Here's this new routine you can add to your everyday. There's a little behavior. There's this tiny little thing you need to do. I think when you add that on top of needing to, learn and equally share what you have learned with that spoke, all those different spokes that you have, if you have a hub and spoke model, and also with that understanding of FinOps as a translation practice, I think having that understanding that the ultimate end goal is that there shouldn't ever be a central FinOps team. That's my belief. It's an impossible goal because you always need someone to still do rate optimization. But ultimately, that should be the goal. If you can get every single engineer, every single, C-suite level worker, everyone, if you can get everyone in this organization to just do a little bit of FinOps each day, you won't need the central team. And I think when you approach it like that, to me at least, whenever I think about it that way, it makes it a lot easier to process.
And do you have an example of a specialty that did this kind of conversion, that from being something kind of centralized disappeared in some form or way because done by everyone?
Oh, that's really good. I do have an example. So initially, the central team that we had were working on almost like a newsletter.
Yep.
And just done by the central team. That's all we had. But I think as we started to develop this, champion model and having people, buy into what we were doing, because again, FinOps is a translation practice, we cannot make a newsletter specific to every single team that's in the organization. That's impossible. Can't do that. So what we could do is if we help these champions understand, okay, this is the core of what we're trying to do. Here's our roadmap. Here are the baseline pillars of what we do. You go off and do that yourself. You make the newsletters for your own teams, things that make sense to them. From that point onwards, our sort of central newsletter wasn't as important. It was still necessary. We needed that, but most of that sort of sharing, most of that knowledge sharing was done by a lot of the champions around. And I think it's so much easier when you realize, okay, not all the attention has to be on the central FinOps team. I think in some of the interviews I got the impression that in the early days, as you mentioned earlier, FinOps practitioners wanted to get as much attention because nobody knew what it was. We needed to prove the value of it to these people that are like, I don't get it. What's the point of even having you on our salary? So I think because of that sort of early push, I think now we're in a state where we don't have to do that, and I think we can start getting attention on FinOps across the entire organization and then start building it into that culture. That's ultimately why I wanted to do this paper on the mental state of FinOps, because if I were to do it on the more technical side, I might have to take a stance on, is central FinOps better or is decentralized FinOps better? Which one? But what I have done is just more so focusing on what's in the minds of the people, regardless of if they're in central or in decentralized. So hopefully that's answered the question. But yeah, I the second that kind of dissemination of news starts going a bit more broader, I see that as a success.
Okay, yes, I agree. What I think is, I would say what I feel is missing into all of this is that dissemination should be recognized as not only part of your work, but also, let's say, your success, as you say. I find too many FinOps practitioners are doing the right thing, but the recipients are not incentivized to do anything with it.
Yeah.
That's why, for example, I was saying I recommend people not to ask developers or engineers to do FinOps things, but to ask their executive to say, can I have 20 points every sprint for FinOps things? So that it's me deciding what are these 20 points going to be used for, but they're just part of the normal job. The engineer that does those 20 points gets the reward of doing 20 points, which is exactly as everything else. And I think that makes it more standard. There is a bit of FinOps comes from technical. People need to learn technical, or they need to learn our language. We hold the knowledge, and that aspect creates contention. And that's why I want also to make sure that whoever now starts with FinOps, as Oliver said, take the time to learn the other bits. Take the time to learn the other side of the bridge. And you have many bridges, okay? You will have to talk with procurement. And going to your discussion, for me, rate optimization is a procurement job. It's a contract, nothing else, nothing more. And it should be there, and we should, as FinOps people, presenting them with all the data they need and all the flexibility that's allowed by different cloud vendors, so that they can negotiate, because that's their job, negotiate the contract. And maybe you can't negotiate with AWS or the cloud vendors. It's not completely true. At one point or another, if everyone is starting to negotiate or you start moving around, it will change. But procurement is specialized in negotiation and contract. It's not something you should be doing as practitioner in the long term. Same finance is expert at organizing money, okay? And when you buy a commitment, we talked about it, for 3 years, it's horrible for finance because they need to adapt the dollar spent for the next 3 years in the calendar. And $1 today is not the same as $1 in 3 years' time. So they need to account for all of this. And sometimes the difference between all upfront, partial upfront, or things like this makes it so hard for the finance that you lose the benefits in between. Same, you need to talk with technical people, and you need to talk with technical people, and that is evolving continuously. But you need to talk with them about architecture more and more, especially with AI. AI is moving everything to the architecture once more and less into, oh, you can do things on the fly. Say, no, you can make mistakes on the fly now, and they cost a ton. So we're going to go back to planning. And so we're back to architecture. So start learning about architecture, start learning about how and where you can apply AI. And in my case, what I would recommend that usually people don't know is start learning about supply chain, because everything you do is a process and goes one step at a time. And for example, the basic knowledge is there is always one bottleneck that is bigger than anyone else. You should only focus on optimizing that bottleneck, because anything optimized before or after is useless. Because you're either going to create more stuff that's going to wait for the bottleneck, or you're going to create more stuff that after the bottleneck is not processing anything because there is nothing to process. So for me, this is the kind of things from the technical perspective you need to go back to. And final one is when we talk with what we call leadership, and we usually say also C-suite, or then we say board, but what they care about a leader for me is we hire them and pay them big money because they are decision makers. they're going to make a decision, and a decision is a bet. There is always a risk and there is always a reward. So bring them risk and reward. Because at the moment, when you look at the stats of FinOps and you see that, or AI in general, that 80% of projects fail, you're there, well, I might have better bets that will return me faster and more. And it's totally normal. So present them back with possibilities, risk, or rewards, how you can manage this. And that is all part of your translation system. But yeah, I think I really love your view on us being translators. I see this as being the bridge. I see, that bridge, that column in the middle with 8 bridges all over the place going in all the directions. And I think that's the bit. It might, yes. And it might be that as practitioners, our job is not to learn much about Kubernetes, but really to stop and start learning enough to have an API. Let's keep it technical with every department. And yes, they are all very, very different. By the way, don't try to get a seat at the board. It's a horrible place to be.
Yeah, I think one thing that I realized that I started to do when I was working in FinOps was that I started to learn a bit too much of things like Kubernetes, that I was getting to the point where I had to start doing Kubernetes because I got so good at it. Or I got so good at databases, I had to start doing databases for people when people were asking me architectural decisions. There's a line. There's a line that you draw, and I think that's again like a really big benefit of the degree that I did. Massive shout out to everyone that's made that degree at the University of Manchester. But it's fabulous because you kind of learn where you draw the line. You learn when to stop, and you know what's in scope. We do a lot of work to help primarily just answer those tough questions, try to map out really complex things. But it's not our job to go off and make all these changes. It's our job to translate. And I think that's why when FinOps came up to me, I felt like I fit in quite well. And, as I was doing the certified practitioner, it started clicking because I got some of that skill set beforehand. So I think to, any listeners listening in, one of those things that I think really helps push you forward, and I noticed this in the research as well, is if you have that ability to build those bridges, make those connections, translate, and then also know when enough is enough, and you just move on to the next thing, because you can get bogged down a lot.
So that's a great mental model. It's going to be my last question for the day. Then you'll be free to go. The question is, what is the mental model to stop? How do I know when I need to stop as a FinOps practitioner in this translator model?
It's going to be a really hard one to explain, but it's the way that I have processed it. It is when you see the twinkle in someone's eye, when they realize it's that simple, I can just do that, and then I this happens. That's incredible. If you see that twinkle in their eye and they feel that they maybe say to you, that's cool, I'm going to go try that. Job done. Your job is done because already you have got them to buy in, right? Because, it's very similar to how we do business deals with people from, around the world. You'll have a translator there. You've got a message to say, the translator translates it over. Once that person gets it, the translator can walk out the room because the two of them will still, the two businessmen will still continue to talk to each other. So once you see that sparkle in the eye of the person that you're trying to get to understand this thing, and they go, okay, cool, I got it. That's when you start. So that's okay. It's hard to explain what the twinkle in the eye is, but I think usually it's you can tell. You can tell in a person if they start to get excited about something, if they start asking a lot of questions as well. They're like, oh, so can I do it with this? Can I do it with that? I think you know when you've hooked someone, right? We work a lot on this as public speakers as well. Those first, 10, 30 seconds of whenever you're speaking to someone is the most important because you're trying to get that hook in them, and then you can say whatever you want. So I think for us as FinOps practitioners, once you've hooked that someone and you've gotten them to understand this very complex thing they didn't know beforehand, your job is done. Move on to the next person that you need to translate for and hook them, and so on and so forth.
I like this. I love this. I will be saying that I don't completely agree with how you approach that, because I think you're going already too far down the line. Because if you are capable of making the eye sparkle of an engineer, you probably spoke too much about techie stuff, because that's the only time my eyes would sparkle too. So that, yeah, but overall, I would say my version would be put yourself with your hands in the back. You cannot do anything. You are here to translate. And so if we take that translation to an extreme, it is what was said by one person. How do you translate into the others? How do you translate? And I'm going to use a very old example of me, say, the concept of RIs and SPs to a finance person, and you learn and you discover that it's a forward contract. And at that point, they just know what to do with it. Or at a workshop, I'm doing a workshop, top-down FinOps, and I think we are going to do one soon again online. But the idea in that workshop is the same: is how do you translate executive intent, and you negotiate that, but you can negotiate but just understanding them, and then you translate that back to tech and you negotiate with them again, because you're just trying to be the translator, as you say, and they then need to do the job. But yes, I love that conversation. I think we could continue. I have at least 4 or 5 other things in my head at the moment which I could ask, but
you have another 4 hours.
My sanity and the one of our listeners, I will definitely. I think we're going to close it there. You've just reminded me that I need to find the 30 seconds to add at the beginning to incentive because I didn't hook well, and I will need your help on that one. And yes, so. Thank you very, very much, Oliver. That was absolutely amazing. Thank you also for being the first interviewee on FinOps After the Low-Hanging Fruit. Have a fantastic rest of the day, and hopefully tomorrow is less hot. How is Manchester?
I'm in London. So
wrong place to be today.
Brutal. 32 degrees, I think 33 degrees for the listeners. The window's wide open, so apologies if throughout this recording you've heard all sorts of sirens and noises, but no, it's absolutely beautiful outside and wonderful to have a chat with you, Frank. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Have a fantastic day, everyone, too. Bye.
Bye-bye.